Hi, this is Joe Lamb with The Healing Tree. We offer natural wellness products for everyday living. And I'm excited today because I have a guest who's going to be talking about women and self-care. Her name is Casey Kaczmarek, and she's a holistic health and wellness coach. Now, as a certified holistic health and wellness coach, writer, public speaker, TV hostess, and expert media source, Casey Kaczmarek is passionate about creating a safe and supportive space for people to honor their needs. She holds a Master of Arts in Health and Wellness Coaching with a concentration in nutrition. And Casey has worked with over 1,000 women and men around the world by tuning into their inner voice, cultivating self-love, and making space for self-care so they can live their best lives. Now, Casey is also a third-degree black belt, Reiki practitioner, and has previously held the titles of Miss Teen Long Beach, Miss American International, and Miss Earth USA. So Casey, welcome.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited to be with you today and spend this time together.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it as well, because I know that self-care for women is a very important topic. But I want to start off by asking you, why did you decide to become a health coach in the first place?
Thank you. That's such a great question. So, interestingly, I didn't pursue or seek a career as a holistic health and wellness coach. I was actually a publicist for about 10 years in real estate and primarily the entertainment industry and fashion. And it really became soul-sucking for me. It was just very overwhelming and didn't feel aligned with my highest self and my highest purpose in life. And after moving from Los Angeles to North Carolina, I'm now in Portland, Oregon, but when I was in North Carolina, I was really feeling desperate to find my life's calling and my life's purpose. And I would pray about it and I would meditate on it for months and months. And I finally, one evening during meditation, just almost like I heard a voice, like a higher power say, holistic nutritionist. And so interestingly, 3 months after receiving what I felt like was this divine message, I became really sick and bedridden. But I had found a university where I could do a nutrition program at the master's level online. And so when I was still bedridden but feeling well enough, I enrolled in that program, started on the path to becoming a holistic nutritionist. But as I was on my own healing journey, I realized that just healing using nutrition, which I completely believe is very powerful, it wasn't enough. In my own healing journey, I had to implement practices holistically that positively affected my mind, my body, and my spirit. And nutrition didn't cover all of those areas. So randomly, I was looking at my university's website one day and I saw that there was health and wellness coaching and a master's degree in that. And after a year and a half in my nutrition program, I switched over to that degree and made nutrition my minor instead. And so, yeah, that's pretty much how I went into health and wellness coaching.
I mean, that's
It's a
that's
lot.
interesting that you would say that you had this calling out to what you call God, the universe, or source,
Yeah.
and then you got suddenly sick and bedridden. I mean,
Right.
what can you say about that? Was that something that was like, oh, here's a gift for you to overcome so you can heal yourself, so then you can help other people heal? I mean, is that how you would approach it?
Looking back now, yes. And even in the midst of it, yes. But at the beginning, I was angry. And it was a grief process that lasted a few years and would even trickle back in as I was healing. Because, you find your calling after you feel desperate and lost for years and years. And to find that, and it felt so like when I heard that, when I received that message and I looked for programs and I found one that just excited me so much, and then to get sick several months later, it felt really devastating and crushing. So yeah, I do feel like part of it was a gift, because looking back, I don't like the way I was living. I didn't like the way I was living my life. It was very fast paced. It was very mindless. It lacked intention. I mean, I've always been a very spiritual, deep, intuitive individual, but I didn't really delve into those parts of me, and becoming sick really forced me to either step up and show up, or kind of check out. And I just did not want to check out. So I used it as an opportunity for real personal and professional growth and development and evolution.
And you shared with me before that the doctor gave you a diagnosis saying, hey, you're going to be in a feeding tube. Don't expect to
Yeah.
get better suddenly. And how did you overcome that? How did you beat the odds?
Thanks. Yeah, thanks for asking that. I should probably share with the audience first and foremost. So I was diagnosed with a systemic autoimmune disease called Sjogren's syndrome. It's very similar to lupus, which most people know about. And Sjogren's affects like over 4.5 million people, primarily women in this country. So there's quite a lot of people affected by it. But with that systemic autoimmune disease, I also had about, I think, 17 other diagnoses. And some of them were really, really devastating. One of them was called gastroparesis, and it's where your digestive system completely shuts down. So we have within our stomachs and our intestines something called, like gastric motility, which means our autonomic system just naturally uses these contractive waves in our digestion to help us process the foods we eat, and we take it for granted every day because our body does its thing naturally. Well, mine stopped completely. I could not eat food. The food would just sit in my stomach and it would cause excruciating pain. And so within 2.5 weeks, I had lost 25 pounds. My body was starving itself to death, literally. I was becoming weaker and weaker. I would only go to the bathroom and I would have to crawl to get there. And yeah, I had an endoscopy done. They confirmed the diagnosis. They wanted me to do lots of other tests with dyes being injected into my body and, just things I viewed as poisons and toxins. I was already so sick. Why would I want more in my body? So I refused, and I was told and read that, there are a lot of people who die from this condition because their bodies essentially starve themselves to death. They end up on feeding tubes. I could end up on a feeding tube. But I started spending hours and hours from bedridden and sick, on my laptop, crying my eyes out, but researching anything and everything I could find. My belief was I found my life's purpose, and now I'm sick. But the fact that that purpose was shown to me and told to me before I got sick meant I knew I had to heal. I knew I was meant to heal. So I really thought I was going to die. A lot of times my husband thought I was going to die. But that one message that I had received is what gave me hope to persevere. And it was really changing my diet was the first step. And then just changing my mindset into one of hope rather than despair.
Wow. So you were really backed into a corner
Yeah.
and forced to make these changes in your life. It sounds
Yeah.
incredible, actually. So after coming through all of this, what is now your personal mission or your mission statement that you want to help people with?
Yeah. So, my little logo. So my business is Health Coach Casey, and my slogan is "It's time to take care of you." And the reason that it's time to take care of you is my mission is because I really believe, for the most part, I got sick because I didn't take care of myself. And I do work with women and men, but my niche is really working with women. Because just growing up in society as a woman, we are innately wired as nurturers, but we're taught by our mothers and our grandmothers and our aunts, and we're taught by media and society that it's our responsibility and our role and our purpose in life to take care of other people. But those key words, other people, doesn't imply taking care of ourselves. And just like my own mother, who has sacrificed and been such a loving, kind, beautiful soul and nurturing everyone else around her, I did the same. But in doing that, I sacrificed myself. I sacrificed my own needs. I didn't speak up for myself when I needed something. And I burned myself out for the sake of my job, for my marriage, for family, for friends, because that is in my heart and it is my nature. But I didn't realize that you could have both. I didn't realize that you could be a loving nurturer and make the world a better place, but also, have those moments that are selfish, but not really, right? They're just taking care of yourself, as we all need as human beings.
Well, the big question is, why do women do that?
Yeah, I think it's just again, I truly believe we are wired to be nurturers, right? Just like men are wired in a certain way. And I also think it's years and years, I mean, hundreds of years of roles being established for men and women, right? Men are providers, women are nurturers. But what hasn't shifted in a lot of ways over time, and especially in the 20th century coming into the 21st century, is that women aren't just homemakers anymore. And even if they are, that's still a really important and big job that, you know, is really never done. It's 24/7. And so I think it's a matter of society shifting its perspective on how it views women. Like, even though you're working full time, women are still expected to raise kids if they have them, and they're expected to still clean the house and run the errands. I mean, that's how it was. I don't have kids, my husband and I don't, but before I got sick, I worked full time and I'd clean the house and I'd go get groceries and I'd manage the finances. And there was a lot of resentment there. And so, to be completely blunt, I had to retrain him when I got sick, because he was just like, well, you're sick. Yeah, you're bedridden, but why aren't you cleaning? Why aren't you working? And again, so I think it's just these messages that I just believe it's these messages that society tells us, and we're raised this way, and we don't question it. But we need, just like the racial and social injustices that are transpiring right now, it's time to question all of these things and create a new, better world.
Yeah, because in this day and age, I mean, women are nurturers and providers in this case because they've entered the workforce, you know.
Exactly.
Because I know in some cultures it's far more extreme, like in Japan, it's like women still have to do all of that. Plus, when they cook, the men eat first, and they just have to wait until he's finished, and then they can finally eat.
I've heard that.
And
I've
it's
heard
just,
that.
you know, so, but what are you finding right now when you're coaching your clients during this time, protest, pandemic?
What am I finding now as far as what?
I mean, are the issues being exacerbated right now
Oh,
during this time? And
yes, yes. And look, I'm a woman, I'm a girl's girl. I have so many girlfriends, so many female relatives. But I will say sometimes I think as women, we also put it on ourselves. Like, even my mother and I talk about how, and even my clients will say, well, you know, my husband doesn't do it the right way. Well, there isn't a right way. There's just get it done, right? Get things off your plate. And so what I'm finding is that, especially with my female clients who have children, they do work full time, but then they're homeschooling. Well, why isn't their partner, if they have a partner, you know, especially a male partner, homeschooling as well? And what I'm finding is that a lot of the women are saying, well, you know, he just doesn't do it the right way, or he can't be patient enough. So yet again, even women are choosing, they're electing to also take more on, because myself as a woman, my mom hearing what it's just easier. It's just easier if I do it myself. But as a result, we're more stressed, we're more overwhelmed. So yeah, I think in part it's not just society and our learned behaviors, but I think women ourselves can be controlling and have that tendency to want things done a certain way. I know I'm definitely that way. And yeah, it's just the issues are being exacerbated, and there's a major decrease in self-care because the time and energy and resources just aren't there right now.
well, especially with families staying home, I mean, how is that affecting it? Because now they're not dropping the kids off at daycare, or I mean, the husband is working at home, or both of them are working at home, and everyone's just around each other all the time now.
Yeah, yeah, it's really hard for those who have younger children, I'm finding. And also, I think I have clients with older children too, and the difficulty there is that they're like very attached to technology, or used to doing the bare minimum and not stepping up to do more because, right, they're children. Even if they're a teenager, they're still a child, and their brain maybe isn't wired in a way that says, well, you know, there's a lot going on. My family needs more help right now. So if I was going to give my clients advice, I'd say if you have older children who are at the age where they can help out, sit down and explain to them that, you know, you need to be a family and work together to get through everything that's going on, that, you know, there isn't extra care, there isn't maybe a house cleaner if somebody can afford that. You know, everyone kind of has to step up even more and do their part. And I think if parents were able to do that, maybe some stress would be relieved. You know, even if there's younger children in the house, have the older ones help watch them. With younger children, I think it's just their energy is demanding, right? And you have to look out for them and make sure they're safe. So when you have to put more attention and energy into your younger children, especially when they're home with you 24 hours a day now and there's really no break, well, how do you make time to implement self-care? How do you even take 30 minutes or 15 minutes for yourself? It just feels impossible for a lot of women in that position.
So you're talking about more of a restructuring in the family dynamics,
Yeah, I think
right?
so.
So, but what are some tips that you can give our customers if they're in that position and the mom or the wife is just taking on too much and it's like becoming overbearing?
Yeah, I would say first and foremost, dig deep and ask yourself why. Why is it so important that you're doing this? Why is it so important that things are a certain way? You know, that, yeah, like, and lower your expectations of yourself, your family members, your home, what it looks like, right? So much easier to have a tidy home when the children aren't there all day, when maybe your partner isn't there all day, maybe even if you're working, but or even if you get outside help, but that's just not possible right now. So lower your expectations of yourself and others. Find a way to make peace with things the way they are. I'm a real huge fan of positive self-talk and mindset and affirmations and mantras. So I would say, even something as simple as this too shall pass, taking it and just taking things day by day. Boundaries, I love boundaries. Healthy boundaries are so important. And I work on that with a lot of my clients as well. So what does that look like? Boundaries are really uncomfortable for a lot of people, especially women. We have a hard time saying no, but women, what can you say no to? What can you say yes to? If you have a partner, male or female, what are they doing? Ask them to step up if you've taken on more too. If you have children who can help, ask them to help. Even little ones can help clean up their own stuff, right? They can do things to help the littler siblings. So there are definitely things that can be implemented. I think a lot of times it's just very uncomfortable, and especially for women, they're afraid that they're just going to shake things up and upset people's, comfort levels. But right now, again, it has to be a team effort, and women are getting sick with chronic illnesses, especially autoimmune diseases, at exponential, like epidemic levels, especially in the United States. And so I always like to share that with women, because you can say you don't think it's going to be you, it'll never be you. But the fact is, like, I was 31 when I got sick, and it was me. So don't take your health and well-being for granted, and don't be afraid to ask for help, or just, again, lower your expectations during this time in the world, because it's probably a once in a lifetime, experience for all of us.
But for the women who are afraid to speak up and have those conversations, how do you help them get over their fear of that, talking to their partner?
Oh gosh. Yeah, that goes really, really deep. I mean, those types of fears and issues and concerns are probably like rooted in childhood, how they were raised, how they grew up. What I like to do with my clients is start very small. And so I coach them and ask them, like, what do you want? And how would that feel? And what would that look like ideally? And once they have created that picture or that image, and, your customers who are watching this can do that at home, just in a journal, answering those questions. When they have that vision created, what is the smallest step that feels scary that they can take to move forward? So that's what I would invite your customers and, the viewers watching this to do, is ask themselves, okay, this is what I want. This is what I need. This is what it ideally looks like. And what feels scary to me about that? And then what's the smallest step I can take toward overcoming that fear? And then do that. So it may not be that you're going to ask your partner to do everything that's on your dream list, your dream wish list, your honey-do list, but it might be one small thing. And when you see your partner respond well to that, that'll give you encouragement and empower that individual to maybe ask more. And to be honest, a lot of partners want to step up and they want to help and support their spouses. Again, it's just, as women, we tend to create these messages in our minds, like they don't know how to do it the right way, or he won't want to. But give your partner a chance.
Okay, that's a good tip. I think people can take. So, but what about this thing about women who feel guilty about taking care of themselves? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, exactly. You know, again, I think it just is, it goes, sorry, I keep going back to this, but I think it's just about in society and from, you know, the women we see being raised in our own worlds growing up, our family members, I mean, at least for me, so my mother is half Mexican. And in the Hispanic Latino culture, women are the nurturers, women are the caretakers, a lot like Asian cultures, like you were saying, and really all cultures. But I especially saw that with my mom and my grandmother and my great grandmother and my auntie growing up. And it's like, you're just not supposed to. I mean, the feeling of guilt, it's shame. But you know, I'm the mother, I'm the nurturer, I'm the wife, I'm the caretaker. I do believe it's part of what we learn. It's part of society's messaging. We see it in the media, we see it on TV and in movies. We just don't know any other way. But there is another way. And the only reason I can say that with full confidence is because I was on the other side. I was the flip side of that coin. I was like, well, this is just how it is. I don't question it. And look, when I was sick and I did start prioritizing my own needs and my own self-care above and beyond my husband's, it was scary. And I did feel guilty. And I think I felt guilty. And I think maybe women feel guilty because we're shifting the dynamic, a dynamic that hasn't really been challenged or questioned. And so there's guilt because if that doesn't happen and more women aren't doing it, then of course we feel guilty, because if they're not doing it, then am I doing something wrong? We question that desire within ourselves. But you know, there are authors like Elizabeth Gilbert, Eat, Pray, Love, Glennon Doyle, you know, Love Warrior and Untamed, which I'm reading right now. These are women who challenge the current paradigm, and this is why their books are bestsellers and they have movies come out, because women innately want it. They just feel scared and guilty about questioning and challenging it.
So it sounds like in some cultures you found that it's more extreme, you know, where the women have this issue, and I guess they're treated as second-class citizens, or they just view themselves as on the extreme side of being nurturing.
Yeah, you know, I feel like I want to say yes to that, but then I think back to my clients who are, you know, really of primarily European descent, and they're just white and, you know, Caucasian women. And when I think back on them, they actually feel the same way. So I think it's women across the board. But yes, I do think, I mean, again, being that I was raised by a Hispanic mother and very close culturally to like my Hispanic family, I did see it very, very dominantly. Yeah, so I do think that some cultures tend to be even more so, and it's just part of the culture. But I think for women across the board, it is an issue. It is an issue.
And what about self-worth issues? Yeah, I mean, I know we're getting into fear, guilt, and now self-worth. You know, I'm throwing a lot of things
Yeah,
at you here. You know,
yeah, it's great.
how do you help women who have that issue, even if when they're not with a partner, you know, and they're
Yeah.
still single? How do you help them overcome it?
Yeah. So, I mean, great question. Such a great, important topic. Self-worth was a huge issue for me for so, so many years. And when I reflect back on why, it was the messaging I received growing up, you know, within my own family dynamic, but then also my peers. And I think the issues of self-worth, they stem from so many places. So really, when I work with clients, I find that it's important to go back to the root of that. Where does that come from? Some people they don't really understand. I like to do really like deep work and just dig and get to, you know, that root cause of these issues. And I think understanding that is really important and paramount to cultivating greater self-worth. I will say that to me, I have this little like triangle diagram I created, and it'll be explained in my first book that I'm currently writing. But I feel like the foundation of self-worth is really self-love, right? So it's like before we get to self-worth, we have to cultivate self-love. And then once we have self-love, we can focus on our self-worth. And then once we have self-worth and we feel like we're worthy of good things, then we can focus on self-care. And these things are all interrelated with each other. I don't think I really answered your question, but it's a very deep process of just digging up the layers of where is the lack of self-worth and self-love coming from, and shifting the mindset and reframing those limiting beliefs.
I think you answered it because it sounds like you just laid out your process. I mean, it's a
Yeah.
triangle, but when you explain it to me, it sounds like you start with self-love and then self-worth and then self-care. It's
Yes.
they have to address certain needs before they can get to the next level.
Right. Exactly.
Okay. So now what about, let's say there's you have a woman who's a client of yours that you're coaching, and she's single and she's working and she's happy because it's just her right now. She's taking care
Yeah.
of herself, but then she has a partner. She gets married, and she eventually has kids, and
Yeah.
that takes a back seat. Her own needs take a back seat, and everybody
Yeah.
else's first. So how do you help her readjust to the family dynamic?
Oh, that's such a great question. If it's okay with you first, so I want to address that picture of that single woman, because I do work with single women too, and believe it or not, they have the same issues as married women in the sense of I'm not worthy, or I'm not taking care of myself. Because if they're single, they're working, right? Most likely they're providing and taking care of themselves, and they're in demanding jobs, and they're still dealing with all of these limiting beliefs and negative self-talk. But the dynamic shifts, yes, because of a partner and children. And so now there is even more pressure and potentially less opportunities. So I guess, like, shifting from that, first I would say, I mean, gosh, if you're a single woman and you're watching this right now and you do want to get married and have kids, know yourself very well, first and foremost. Work on yourself, work on your limiting beliefs, work on your self-worth, cultivate self-love and a meaningful self-care practice. And think about what that's going to look like when you have more people in your life to take care of and to nurture. And what I tell, especially women who are married, whether it's a female or male partner and have children, especially, is even 15 to 20 minutes a day makes a huge difference in meaningful self-care. If you can just find that time every day, and most of us can, to do something that honors yourself in a deep and meaningful way, it'll help. It makes a huge impact. So, maybe as a single person, you have 2 hours, several days a week where you can do that. And when you're married and or have children, you can find 15 to 20 minutes a day. And I just want to say, for everyone watching, self-care is not selfish. Self-care is absolutely essential. It's needed. It's detrimental to your health and well-being. And women will say, well, I can't find the time. I don't have the energy. But here's the thing. If you really love your family that much and you care that much about their health and well-being, everyone uses the example of when you're on an airplane, you put your mask on first, and then you take care of your children. It's the same thing with self-care. If you are not honoring and addressing your own needs, how can you truly be there to take care of your family?
I love the airplane analogy. That's so true, because if you if you help someone else, your child, and you pass out, then that child is less likely to be able to help you. I mean, that's
Right? Exactly. So it's the same thing here.
well. So, but what about what exactly are some self-care tips that you recommend women do?
Yeah, again, great question. It's an interesting question too, because self-care really has no right or wrong answer. Again, when working with individuals, I like to ask them what self-care means to them, because self-care can mean reading a book, but self-care can mean taking a trip alone. In fact, I'm having some major self-care. I rented a house at the beach next week, and that's what I'm going to do for myself. Now, not everyone can afford that or take the time to do that, but it's really like, what I would say, instead of giving specific tips and tools for self-care, what I would say to, again, the viewers today is take some time, if you can, or not even if you can, just do it because it's so important. Take some time and think about the things that you love to do, that bring you joy, happiness, inspiration, that make you feel healthy and energized. Things that don't weigh you down or make you feel heavy. And whatever those things are, implement those into your life in meaningful ways. So, it might be having a glass of wine with your partner It could be taking a hot bath. It could be going for a hike in nature. It could be, like I said, traveling. There are so many things, but foundationally, I talk about self-care with regards to mind, body, and spirit health. So if you would like really specific, tangible tips, I would say cultivate a mindfulness or meditation practice, even if it's 5 minutes a day. And you can use amazing apps like Insight Timer, Calm, or Headspace, because first and foremost, self-care really starts within our own minds and our hearts. Journaling is another great tool just to help people cultivate greater self-awareness and to just pretty much dump all the things that we carry and that cause us stress in our body. So journaling is great. And just take time for yourself when you can, honoring your needs, just having some quiet time, having some peace for yourself, and then eat well, avoid processed foods, try to limit your alcohol and caffeine intake. The basics that we all pretty much know about, but it's easy to get distracted by life and kind of let those things go to the wayside.
Okay, so it sounds like it would vary for every person, because some
It,
people, they
yeah.
might like, some women might like the spa treatment, but some might like
Yes.
running instead. Some might
Yes.
like what you said, going to a beach house somewhere. So
Yeah.
it's I guess asking themselves what they like in terms of how they want to care for themselves, then what treats they want to
Ex-
give themselves. So
exactly. And that's exactly the case. And try to implement, like I said, those foundational self-care practices. Eat well, exercise, practice good sleep hygiene, stress management. Those are the basics. And then once you have those nailed down, above and beyond that, what else can you do that's truly meaningful to you? I mean, for me, even sometimes just making an organic green juice at home or a green smoothie is self-care, right? And I think what's key too is we go through life so fast. We live in such a fast-paced world. COVID, the pandemic, has kind of forced us to look at things different. But when we take a moment to really stop and honor and acknowledge those moments of self-care, it has a bigger impact on us, right? So somebody can make a green smoothie, but they're running out the door, or they're running to a meeting and drinking it mindlessly. But if you make that green smoothie and you cultivate gratitude for the ingredients, and you sit and you really incorporate all your five senses while you're drinking it, right? You're really using mindfulness in this process, then it becomes a practice of self-care. So again, intention is so important behind these activities that we integrate into our lives.
yeah, so you're talking about mindfulness consumption, mindful eating, which is,
Yeah.
when you sit down to a meal, you turn everything off and you just enjoy the meal and you appreciate it, and you say thanks before eating it, and instead of, because I don't know if you've heard the issue with, if you're watching TV and you're eating, it can lead to weight gain, because you're not paying attention to if your body
You're
is full or not. You just keep going because your mind is engaged with what you're watching versus, you know, your body in that moment. So, what about in terms of what you said, self-worth? Um, if there, I mean, there's a lot of negativity that people have in their minds, and that's just the way we are, fight and flight mode. And I've heard that 80% of our thoughts are negative,
Mhm.
and majority of those thoughts are actually repetitive. So
Mhm.
we're constantly just like reinforcing negativity with ourselves. So what if you have a woman that has these thoughts, that says, she says, I'm ugly, nobody loves me, I don't, I'm not worthy of love, or things like that. So how do you help her overcome those issues, like to just make that transformational shift?
Yeah, that's a scary process. So I've definitely had a lot of clients that we've done that work. And again, it's just very uncomfortable, right? Because it's like completely reversing these limiting beliefs. So it starts with first acknowledging them and realizing that they're detrimental, and how and why, and also having the desire to actually do the work and change, right? That's so important. Like, we can do the work all day long, but if we're not ready for it and we're not really open for that transformation, it's not going to stick with us. And in the work I've done with my clients who have had those experiences with these, this negative self-talk, these limiting beliefs, this maybe, lack of self-worth, I challenge them to start small, right? So like, what's the biggest limiting belief, or even big, but what's the one of the biggest limiting beliefs you have? If it's, I'm not worthy, or I'm ugly, or I'm, fat, no one will ever love me, then I ask them, what is the opposite of that to you? And I have them write that down. And whatever the opposite of that is, they'll write it down. Okay, I am beautiful inside and out and worthy of love. So that will be their affirmation and their mantra over the next few weeks or month until they recognize that they start experiencing a shift. So it's as simple as just telling ourselves something different, even though it's extremely uncomfortable to do so. It just starts with the willingness to tell ourselves that that's not true. And so I love mirror work. That comes from Louise Hay made that popular in our culture, but looking in the mirror, saying, I love you, saying, something that's positive and affirming of our self-worth. It sounds so simple. And a lot of people will say, well, how can that really make a change? How can that really, create any type of difference? But it does, because if you've been telling yourself these negative limiting beliefs for so long, and you can see the negative effect they've had on your life. So imagine if you shift those to the positive, those will have a similar effect, but in an opposite, more empowering way. And I do want to also address the point what you said about 80% of our thoughts being negative. That is so true. And for those who aren't really familiar with the brain, I want to explain that we are wired to think negatively because it's what helps us survive as human beings. It's just in our DNA as the species we are. So we have to consciously, very intentionally be aware of our thoughts and think positively, think positive thoughts, because again, we're just wired to be negative and wired for that. It's just survival. It's our mechanism.
So when people come to you for help, are they even aware of these limiting beliefs that they have, or they just know that there's something they want to change in themselves, and then you help uncover that?
It's both. Yeah, it's really both. I've had clients say, I don't love myself, I don't like how I look, or I have no confidence. So there's definitely clients who have that awareness. And then there's some who have less awareness, and it emerges, throughout our work together. That's my job. That's my work, to hear what the client is saying and to really go deeper underneath their words, underneath their body language, and really hear, not just listen to the words, but hear the deeper meaning of what they're saying, and then reflect that back to them like a loving, kind, compassionate, empathetic mirror being held up to them so they can see what their truth really is. And then we work together to, overcome that.
Yeah, you mentioned the mirror exercise before, and I've done that a couple times in the past. It is really strange. You're looking in your own eyes and you're saying it. And you're like, I love you, I love you. And it's just like, okay. But the times that I have done it, I just would feel like this energy would, I guess, release from me in that sense, where I don't. That's the best way I can explain it.
Yeah.
It's like a tingly feeling,
Yes.
But
Yeah.
then also for limiting beliefs, I mean, I have this notion that if you release a limiting belief, you actually have to replace it with something, because otherwise, when something is gone, there's a void there, and it could be
Yes.
filled with another negative limiting belief. So you talk about something about reframing versus releasing. So
Yeah.
how do you reframe a limiting belief?
Sure. And I'd love to address that too. Look, you can absolutely release negative beliefs, but I agree with you. And the reason I feel like we shouldn't release them and rather reframe them instead is because of what you said. You're leaving kind of a hole there. So I'm sorry, ask your question again about reframing. How do
How
we
do
do
you
that?
how do you do the reframing? But I think you kind of mentioned it then, right?
Yeah.
Okay, because you talked about do the opposite. Have someone say the opposite. If it's I'm ugly, change it to I'm beautiful because for these reasons.
Exactly. And
Okay.
there are different ways to do that. Positive self-talk through affirmations is a really powerful way to do that. We talked about mirror work. When I first started doing mirror work and I would say, I love you, Casey. I mean, I would cry. I lacked so much self-worth and so much self-love. It was kind of scary how much there was there for me. But yeah, that. And the other way to release limiting beliefs is, so we start with the words, right? We start with the mindset and the mind shift. But once we start having that down, then our actions in life and life have to match that. So that's the next step. And the next tool I would suggest to people is, once you are able to say that to yourself, start creating actions in your life that match those words, because now you're enforcing them in the physical sense.
Well, now if when you've helped women with this, reframing of their limiting beliefs,
Yeah.
how long does it, does it stay forever and that's it? Or do they ever revert? There's like, what's the time frame that it takes to get that to shift, or is it vary with every person?
Yeah, it varies because everyone's in such a different place in their journey, right? So some women are just like, I'm done. I'm fed up. I have to do the work. Like, I want this so bad. And so that's where a lot of their energy and attention is placed. But then there are women who, maybe they don't have the same time and energy, or it's not as a big, they want to do it, but it's not as big of a priority in their life. So it might take longer. And absolutely, even myself, I've cultivated self-love, self-worth. I have a great self-care practice, but I'm a human being and I live in a very dynamic, ever-changing world that's challenging. And so even I still have those things, and I have to use and reinforce within my own life the tips and tools I teach other women and even men. And so, yeah, I think life itself is the biggest classroom, right? And so it's just, what matters is not that we revert back at times, but that we remember those tools that we have in our like little wellness backpack or toolbox, and we remember to pull them out when we catch ourselves starting to maybe slide backwards a little bit. It's not failure, it's just being human, and it's okay. And that's where then self-compassion and loving kindness come in.
Okay, so it sounds like once they've worked with you, they have a set of, let's say, Casey's tools that they can fall back on and use it again and again to keep uplifting themselves. That's what it sounds like, right?
Absolutely. And I encourage, people to find their own tools. What I love about coaching is, that's also why I went into coaching instead of being a nutritionist after all, is because it's really about helping people find out what's best for their lives. Like, I'm kind of hard. I give tough love on my clients at times. When they say, I don't know, I say, yes, you do. You know. As human beings, we have intuition. We have a gut instinct. We know ourselves so well that we have our answers. It's just, again, parents, teachers, doctors, media, friends, family, spouses, everyone pushes their own agendas and their own messages on us. So we forget who we are. Most of us, men and women, we forget who we are, and we forget to honor our inner voices. So through the process of coaching, I help my clients cultivate greater self-awareness. And when they have greater self-awareness, after we're done working together for 6 months or a year or so, yes, I've given them a foundation of tools to utilize, but I also help them learn to cultivate their own tools by understanding and knowing themselves on a deeper level. And in that, it becomes more authentic to them. And when things are more authentic to people, they're more likely to follow through on those practices that can be long lasting.
Yeah, it sounds like you're helping to have them co-create,
Yes,
the
it
tool,
is.
but yours is just like a launching pad, a foundation to start from. So, um,
Exactly.
so let's get even deeper, because I know we've talked about deep emotional issues. Let's get into some trauma now.
Okay.
And how does that affect someone and lead to health issues in their life?
Sure, sure. Yeah. So, I won't go into the details, but I experienced a lot of trauma throughout my life. So, I will just use myself as a personal example, maybe instead of a client or somebody. But science shows that trauma creates an inflammatory process throughout the body. So, right, our brain, our body, it affects us on a cellular level. And when that trauma is held in, through the fight, flight, or freeze process, and we don't use like somatic body work or healthy release processes or therapy, we're holding it in. There's like, let's say a child experiences abuse or witnesses abuse growing up. How do they have a healthy opportunity to release that, to move through that, to get help for it? They don't, right? They're pretty helpless, and over time and as they continue to grow up, they'll respond according to that trauma. And it's the cycle that continues to be exacerbated because, again, it creates that fight or flight response. They're easily triggered, and that leads to inflammatory processes in the body that can therefore, and often do, lead to chronic illness, autoimmunity, like I mentioned earlier is an epidemic in the US, especially among women. I'm one of those women that fall into that. I mean, it's like tens and tens of millions. I think there's over 50 million women in the US. So that's probably like 15% of the population in the US of women who have some sort of inflammatory autoimmune condition. So again, it goes back to self-care, which is why I'm so passionate about self-care, because when we care for ourselves, we are honoring our needs, we are tuning into our mind, body, and spirit, and we're honoring the things that we need, and we're taking care of ourselves so that we can therefore dampen that inflammatory process.
So I mean, do you have to use a different approach when it's trauma that it's that deep rooted versus just thoughts of, oh, I'm ugly, I'm fat, is it?
Whew. Well, I mean, for me personally, my belief is that trauma itself, the actual trauma, should be dealt with by working with a licensed mental health professional, like a psychologist or a psychotherapist or a licensed marriage family therapist. What I do is I'm a great partner to the individual when they're working with a therapist, because the therapist is working with the actual trauma itself. I am working with the trauma response, the results. Like, how has that affected you in your life with how you perceive the world, how you perceive yourself, how you interact in relationships, your own self-worth. So it's a great partnership.
Okay, that makes sense. And you mentioned journaling earlier, and a lot of people that I've interviewed, health coaches, doctors,
Yeah.
bring up journaling a lot. So can you give an example of how one of your clients used journaling and how it helped them?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. One of my clients journals every day. She's a mother of 3. And she has 2 types of journals. One that's just like a free flowing journal, and one that's a gratitude journal. And I love both. And so the free flowing journal is like, I mean, I see it as more or less being your own therapist, right? Because often we're so on in the world that when we journal, and especially like this client, for instance, a lot of our truths come out and we're surprised. It's like a brain dump, right? And instead of sharing it with a coach like myself or a therapist, it's really a really sacred and safe place to honor our own truth and to experience a lot of clarity. So it's an important part of interpersonal work for people to do. And was there a second part of your question?
It was, yeah, how did it change them as a result?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And so, yeah, it's just been, thank you. Sorry about that. But it's been a great opportunity for her and all of my clients, honestly. I recommend journaling to all of them to just, again, experience more clarity about their own desires, their own truths, and their own needs in their lives. What's negatively affecting them? What's positively affecting them? What do they want or need less or more of in their lives? And I think when my clients personally journal, it gives them more courage and confidence, because when we're up in our heads, we tend to ruminate, right? In mindfulness and meditation practice, we call that monkey mind, because it's all over the place. But when we journal, we're dropping more into our hearts and our souls. And so again, it creates that clarity. And when we have clarity, a lot of times it's very empowering because we're connected to our deep truth. And that's so liberating and affirming as individuals.
Well, what is an example of, let's say I'm going to sit down and journal. So
Yeah.
am I just going to write what I had today, what I ate, what I drank? Or are we talking about, like, I need to talk about my feelings, or like what I'm mad at, or what I'm happy about, or like what's a good approach?
Yeah, so there's all sorts of journaling, types of journaling. I think the most meaningful and one that I love, I don't know if you've heard of the book, The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. It's really
Yes,
famous. Hey,
I read
morning
that a long time
pages.
ago. Yes, you're the
Yeah,
second
so,
person to mention that as well.
okay, good. Yeah, so I love morning pages. I do morning pages in the morning, and I do morning pages any time of the day if I don't have time in the morning and I'm running right into meetings. But essentially, for those who aren't familiar with morning pages, it's what I like to call it, a brain dump. You just put pen to paper and you start writing. You do not think about it. You just free flow. Now, some people, journaling, and I love your question, because journaling really used to be about, write down what's going on in my life, write down what's going on in my day. But I find that the type of journaling where it is, again, just dumping, just pouring out without thinking, just free flowing, even if it's just cuss words, or if it's repeating the same sentence over and over and over again. If you truly open up to yourself, you'll be really amazed by what pours out of you. So it's writing in a way that's not contrived or that you're not thinking or conscious about. That's what it is. It's unconscious. It's unconscious journaling. It's really allowing that subconscious to open up and write from the depths of your being and not thinking about it. Just letting pour out whatever's there. It's so incredibly cathartic and so enlightening.
Yeah, it sounds like journaling is just like, it's like a creative writing process where you're not judging it, you're just letting it out. And that's the process, because no one's ever going to
Exactly.
see it. You're just, and then
Yeah,
what about, how
exactly.
do you feel about using nature to help restore someone's, I guess, sense of self-worth? I mean, I have my plant back here. I call him Charlie. So once in a while, I'll just hug him. I'll say, "How you
Oh,
doing? How you doing, Charlie?" And that just helps me. So do you tell your clients anything like that?
yeah. Oh, I love it. Hi, Charlie. Nice to meet you. I'm sending you a virtual hug. Yeah, I have my little bamboo plant here too. So yeah, nature is huge, right? Nature is so healing. In fact, I recently did a webinar with a major corporation in Washington, and I talked about the importance of getting into nature. Science and research just show that it's so incredibly healing, and I mean, for me personally, I go hiking about twice a week for anywhere from like 2.5 to 3.5, 4 hours. I spend as much time in nature as possible. I mean, I think if we think about it in more of a little bit of a woo-woo and spiritual way, we're all made from the same matter and we're all energy. And nature is so pure and cleansing and healing and cathartic and peaceful and all those good things that it's just so important for us to connect with that, to get outside of our homes, get outside of our office buildings. If you happen to be working in an office right now or at home because of COVID. But yeah, I mean, science shows a multitude of benefits, from decreasing blood pressure, improving cardiovascular health, decreasing stress. And when we get out of nature, we tend to be active, right? So it's really good for our weight, for our peace of mind and well-being. I love to, get to some nature trails here, and I'll just stop and meditate for like half an hour in the middle of a hike. So there are so many benefits that are backed by research. And, people can ask, how much should I get into nature? I would say as often as possible. I don't think there's ever too much, but if it's really hard for you, make it a family affair on the weekends, right? Go out to a park, go out to a hiking trail, go to the beach, whatever you can do. And again, I always just like the number 15 minutes. If it's 15 minutes once or twice a week, I always tell people who feel especially very overwhelmed, something is better than nothing. Let that be one of your mantras. Something is better than nothing.
Okay. And I know we were in a lot of, the deep negative emotions. So I want to switch gears a little bit. And
Okay.
what does it look like to you to have someone who's living their happiest, healthiest, and most authentic life? And that's something that you've written on your website.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Okay, so living your happiest, healthiest, most authentic life is, I guess it goes back full circle to what maybe my first response during, this interview today is, am I honoring my needs? So, somebody who is truly honoring their needs, somebody who is taking care of themselves in mind, body, and spirit. And authenticity is owning your power and speaking your truth. So all these things that I'm mentioning, I have done and do, but they're still challenging for me. And I think it's just a lifelong process and a lifelong journey to living your happiest, healthiest, most authentic life. But I think what's important is starting the process, is doing the things. So yeah, I mean, we've talked about kind of the steps, the tips and tools and the steps to take in order to get there today.
How can you help women see that, I guess, that future vision of themselves, so they can envision themselves in a better place than where they're at now? Do you do anything like that? Any visualization exercises for them?
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. So okay, so again, I love affirmations because that's the shift in the mindset and the positive self-talk from negative. And absolutely, when we also implement visualizations with our affirmations, then it just reinforces them. So what I would recommend, my tip or my tool for viewers today is when you are, let's just say, take 5 to 10 minutes a day if you can, and go through your affirmations, right? Out loud or in your mind. And as you're doing so, as you're saying them to yourself, visualize every single detail of that affirmation. Or if you're not using affirmations, spend time visualizing in detail the life you want to create for yourself or the person that you want to become. Visualizations are extremely powerful, but when we use affirmations and we use visualizations, it can't be a one-off, right? Because our brains need like 21 to 30 days to rewire themselves. So these needs to be ongoing practices that we cultivate in our lives.
And so what other results, I mean, we're getting to the end here, but what other results can you share that you've uh, been able to achieve in helping your clients?
Yeah, I mean, I had a client who's a wife and a mother, and she works full time, and she has several autoimmune diseases, and she was hospitalized multiple times for hydration or dehydration, and she just hated water. She just hated drinking water. It was like torture to her. Not one doctor could get her to drink water. And, I just really listened to her and what the issue was, and, understanding her underlying motivational factors, and together we created a plan where she was motivated to do so because she was rewarded by things that she really wanted to experience in her life. And it was kind of insane to me because after it was 6 weeks of working together, she was drinking over 100 ounces of water a day. She loved it. Her doctors were so amazed. So that is like a very simple experience. I've also helped women completely change life courses as far as career and pursuing their dreams, being miserable and really unhappy and unfulfilled in a career, to doing things that they truly love and are inspired by. I've worked with women on, of course, confidence issues, self-love, self-worth, where it was just they couldn't even look at themselves in the mirror, to now they're holding themselves high. I've worked with women on relationships, like being in relationships romantically that did not serve them, but they kept sacrificing themselves or kept putting themselves second, or not really respecting or honoring their own needs and boundaries, and being able to finally say, no, I don't want or need this in my life anymore. And then honestly, I think I'm my greatest success story, right? I was sick and bedridden off and on for 4.5 years, and doing the deep work in mind, body, and spirit, I was able to reverse that and now pay it forward to other people.
And then for your programs, what do they look like on an individual basis? And also if you do it for corporations as well, what does that look like?
Yeah, so individually, I typically work with people, primarily women. I see them every other week for about 6 months. I mean, I do have clients I've been working with for over a year, and it's more just ongoing support with them. Yeah, so that, I mean, it's very simple. That's pretty much what it is. And corporations, right now I'm doing wellness webinars. I'll speak in person, but again, it goes back to self-care and how to avoid burnout, how to achieve balance in life. That's primarily the work I do within the corporate realm.
And does that help with their productivity? Because I know, businesses, that's what they look for as well.
Yes, absolutely. Especially this time during COVID, it is, because this is a new world for people to try and navigate through, and most people, aren't familiar with living that life, with being at home and having those boundaries. And so it's helping them create those boundaries, helping them to continue to cultivate self-care, and helping them, be more efficient and effective while working during a worldwide pandemic, which in itself is stressful enough, but while they're at home in a place where is usually intended to be relaxing and restful, or, family time. But now how do you do that and do your job in the same environment?
Yeah, I mean, we're wrapping up here, but Casey, is there anything else that you feel like you haven't shared that you would still like to share?
I mean, not really. I don't think so. Thanks for asking.
Well, let's share your website then. Your website, social media handles. How can people find you?
Yeah, absolutely. So my website is www.healthcoachcasey.com, and Casey is spelled Casey. And my Instagram and Facebook are at Health Coach Casey. And I actually have a TV show coming out this summer on an internet network called New You Network. It's NUYU Network. And it'll be available for streaming on Apple TV, Amazon, Roku, and Sling in the fall. And it's called Health Coach Casey.
So that's it. So thank you, Casey.
Thanks, Joe. I really appreciate it. And thank you, everyone, for watching.